This episode is brought to you by Progressive, home of the Name Your Price tool. You say how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote. Visit Progressive.com to get started. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, December 1878. President Rutherford B. Hayes installs the first telephone in the White House. This was just 14 months after Alexander Graham Bell had transmitted the first telephone call, and Bell himself installed the line in the White House. Maybe my favorite little tidbit from this whole story. The phone number for the White House line was, folks, grab a pencil and write this down so you don't forget it. The phone number for the White House was 1. That was the telephone number. If you want to dial the White House, just hit 1.
That was a real problem after 10 more numbers get handed out.
So let's talk about Hayes and Bell and the first telephone line at the White House. Here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
My question to you is Rutherford B. Hayes the most forgotten president? If you ask people to name the presidents, do you think he's the one who most gets not remembered?
The one reason that I think he might be more remembered than like Chester Arthur is because he's the big end of Reconstruction guy, kind of a coin toss as to whether he becomes president or not. But I mean, with a name like Rutherford B. Hayes, you're not going to, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
He's like top 20.
Top 20 remembered or top 20 forgotten?
I would say, well, for me, because I study.
Well, yeah, you don't count.
Think about the people, Kelly.
Sorry. Probably, yes, top 20 forgotten. I would put him up there with Fillmore and other people.
Oh, right. Forgotten about Fillmore.
Right, exactly. Almost by definition, we're not going to think of the person who's forgotten the most.
No
So
way.
there you go.
Somebody after somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Was there a third Adams? Who knows? There's no real way of knowing. But anyway, I can't really recall many Rutherford B. Hayes moments on this podcast. But actually, let's do that before we talk about the telephone, because actually Hayes, two notable things, as you said, Nikki. He comes into office, very contested election.
The corrupt bargain.
He goes to sleep thinking he lost and wakes up with people telling him that he's the president, and that they pulled some stuff. Ish. But he is also, kind of has to clean up Johnson's mess as the second Reconstruction president. He is a Republican. But where does he stand, Kelly, on that sort of, if Lincoln's on one side and Johnson's on the other, where's Hayes trying to kind of position himself?
I would say he's like the final Reconstruction president in some ways, because when he becomes elected, part of this corrupt bargain is all of the provisions that were put in place to sort of protect the newly freed enslaved and sort of like make the slaveholding South pay for their sins and crimes gets taken away. So the South basically forces, the government to industrialize them, to build railroads and all of that, to have major renovations come through the South. They pull out all of the federal troops in the South, which was sort of like the last stand of protection among these like white mobs and terrorism. After that, you start to lose a lot of black elected officials as well. That's their final term is during his presidency.
Yeah, it's kind of a rollback of the Grant administration, which, he's still a Republican, so he's in the line of Lincoln and Grant, but it is a little Johnson-esque, right?
Right.
Yeah.
His official bio on the White House website says he oversaw the end of Reconstruction, began the efforts that led to civil service reform, and attempted to reconcile the divisions left over from the Civil War. It's like that word "attempted" is doing a lot of
and
work.
Started. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's really generous.
Yeah. But the civil service reform is interesting, and to your point, a lot of kind of professionalization of the government infrastructure, at least, and industrialization and so forth. But I guess including, right, if there's this air of like accepting modernity and the Industrial Revolution coming, the first telephone line. So what do we need to know about the first line coming into the White House?
The White House is a kind of an early adopter on the telephone technology, which is unusual for a White House. They are not usually on the cutting edge of tech. But, there's this new technology. As you said, Jody, 14 months had passed since it was first proven to be a useful technology. And Alexander Graham Bell installs the phone in the telegraph room. So you can kind of see it as part of the communications hub of the White House. So it's not this phone that's like sitting in the Oval Office on the president's desk. It is in a room for communication. And it's interesting because it's both a faster way of getting information, depending on how many other people actually have telephones. Not a lot at the time. I think there's like 180-ish at the time. So there's not a lot of people he can call. But I think that the other important thing is, unlike the telegraph, now, unless somebody is taking notes, you don't have a written record of that communication.
Yeah.
And that begins to change things.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. There's no transcript.
Yeah.
Which, in some ways is good and in some ways is bad. You think about...
As a historian, don't like it.
Yeah, I know, definitely. But if you think about, especially the kinds of communications that are coming into the White House, a transcript would be greatly appreciated.
Or the fact that that those communications kind of have to pass through someone's hands, right? A written letter or a telegraph has to go through a courier or a telegraph operator.
Yeah, and this is the first time you're hearing someone's voice too, right? It's not like... just some sort of I don't know, someone reading off of a transcript, but you will hear the person's voice directly speaking to you, which is at this time, it's unprecedented that you could have some sort of contraption where you could hear someone for miles or states away. It's just unheard of.
Yeah. This isn't really part of this story, but it is, the fact that Alexander Graham Bell himself installs this. It's also a chance to I'm always love the fact that Bell's first transmission on the telephone was to his assistant, and he says, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you," which is like the whole point of the telephone is that you don't have to call someone into the room if you want to talk to them. And that Graham Bell decided that his first message ever was going to be to call someone over in person. It always struck me as a funny little historical moment.
And it's what hath God wrought, right?
No, exactly. Yeah.
Come on.
Other people kind of meet the moment, right? And this is just like,
small
hey, Watson,
step for mankind.
Did you pick up those sandwiches for lunch or what? So October 26th, 1877, there is a ceremony to inaugurate the service, and then it gets installed, around this time in the winter. But it's put together. This ceremony is put together by Rutherford B. Hayes' wife, Lucy. There's some interesting tidbits about that moment, but one thing that's interesting is that she was big in the temperance movement. And I don't know, maybe it's just interesting to me that she would be very much embracing modernity. I don't know. There's just something interesting there that Lucy was the one who seemed to both kind of be a big part in both those stories.
But the temperance movement is kind of cutting edge for women in activism in the period, right? It's definitely moral reform, so it feels very traditionalist. But the fact that women were finding ways to engage in politics before they had the vote made it slightly different than we think about it now.
Yeah.
I was going to say they would think of it as progressive, we wouldn't, but for them and the ways it came about. Yeah,
if you think of it as societal progress writ large, then I guess they both make sense, right?
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting The World Together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
Thoughts on that inauguration service? There's an interesting little tidbit.
Had a quartet come in, which is fine. Once again, you guys aren't getting the point of the telephone, but that's fine. And she has them sing a song, except Here's the problem. The bass singer was so low and so loud that he fries the sounding board. So a failed experiment, much like Temperance.
Yeah.
So the singing was so raucous at the inauguration ceremony that it actually destroys the device. I love it.
It's incredible.
I love it. Yeah. It's a great tidbit. And
Yeah,
Bell.
yeah. And someone's like hearing feedback.
Yeah,
on the
right,
other
exactly.
end. Like-
I love that Bell was like probably not feeling so happy about his
Right.
well,
It's
his
like, come
device
on,
getting
guys.
destroyed, or about that his device couldn't withstand that kind of frequency. So it gets installed. The number is 1. Nikki, you mentioned, it's funny when I read about this story. You mentioned that they could only call a limited number of people. The only other phone was the Treasury Department, and so that was the only kind of direct government phone calls they could make. You read reporting of this, and it says that Hayes could call 188 people. Is your impression that that's just the number of people who had telephones, period, or did they make a list of 188?
Presumably it's the number of telephones allowed. And also remember, like, you mentioned that the Treasury Department is the direct phone line in the White House. I'm not sure how much of this would have been direct calling, whether they had party lines, because that's what would develop when more and more people would get telephones. I guess if you only had 188 people, you can do direct calling because,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's about a year later that the first telephone exchanges are set up as the network starts to get built up. You want to talk about some other? Oh, we should also say Hayes was the first one to have, the first president to also use a typewriter. So, obviously.
Techno guy.
You know what?
Tech guy. Real
This
dweeb.
makes me think. This makes me think that if the White House is sort of like the first place to have technology, the telephone, the typewriter, later maybe solar panels or something like that. I don't know. I'm thinking about all these different ways. Do we think that that's appropriate? Is that how things typically happen? That the White House gets like the newest, I don't know, iPhone, whatever, like find some piece of technology. Are they the first? Are they like the alpha group? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it changes over time, right? Although you do have like technologies like ARPANET, which becomes the internet, that are developed in the military. So it has like a government route, but the actual adoption of email, having internet in the White House, those things seem to lag quite a bit. Remember how Obama had a BlackBerry and he had to give it up?
Having his own phone.
Yes!
For sure.
I'm not giving up
Because
my
of those
BlackBerry.
security concerns.
Hayes would have had a BlackBerry and he would have kept it.
Yeah. And an iPhone.
That's right.
Do we want to do any more little tidbits of interesting moments in White House phone history? I mean, obviously, in the 70s, phones are tapped nonstop. And
60s and 70s.
I think it's crazy that it's like 50 more years until President Hoover gets a telephone line installed in the Oval Office. Like, I would have thought the first place the phone was going was the Oval Office, but no, that takes decades.
Little interesting tidbit is, that phone that sat on the Oval Office desk was routed through the secretary, and the secretary could just pick up the line and listen in if he or she, but she wanted to. And in 1993, Bill Clinton was like, well, anyone can listen into my calls. I need to have a private line. And of course, he got a private line, but I don't think he just used it for business.
Yeah, I would say so.
There's a reason he wanted a private line.
Yeah. And there's a reason that, Nixon and Kennedy and
Nixon too.
And, obviously the recording of those telephone lines would get a bunch of presidents into trouble as well over the
Quite a
years.
lot of hot water, but thank you from historians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, we should have run this down, but are there actually red phones in the White House? Or is that just a sort of myth as well? I don't know.
There was a red phone. It might have been in the Situation Room. I'm pretty sure there was, although listeners fact check us, or we'll do an episode about the
I think
potential red phone.
No, you certainly see it in movies. That's for sure.
Yes, and I think what I'm remembering, but we should do this, and listeners should chime in. But I think what I'm remembering is that the kind of like line between Moscow and Washington during the Cold War, there was never actually a kind of like red telephone you picked up, and it was
right.
Like
Probably
was
the
on
red
other-
phone was metaphorical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, that is something to look into. So we will leave it there, but we will wrap up, as we often do, with some also on this days. So December 3rd, also on this day, 1800, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tie in the Electoral College vote. Aaron Burr was just super chill from then on out, right?
Yeah, no, he was like, you know what? You take this one, TJ. In 1868, you have the first Black people serving on a U.S. federal jury trial, and the person who was on trial, Jefferson Davis.
Have we done that? Jefferson Davis's trial? I know we've done other questions of kind of justice in the wake of the war.
We recently did Davis's trial.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we sure did. And his unrepentant.
Yes, well, that's true.
That.
Yeah, I mean, we've done the sort of pardoning and the citizenship question and
but maybe not the trial itself.
The war crimes trial, which we recently did. But yeah, I you know, and mostly on the backs of those episodes, but I've been really, really kind of interested in these questions of not just Reconstruction, but actual justice, what that meant in the wake of the war. So yeah, we should dig into that one.
In 1962, Edith Spurlock Sampson was sworn in as the first U.S. Black female judge. So making the way for Ketanji.
Yeah. Put it on the list. Another really fascinating one. We should get to that, 1962. And then in 82, this is a story that I think a few people have suggested to us, but this Times Beach, Missouri story where toxic levels of dioxin are found and the town would be completely evacuated and disincorporated. And so
we should definitely do
that. A really
that.
interesting moment in environmental history and industrial pollution. So we will get to that at some point. But
well, at least a year from now.
Exactly. But it's funny. I say that kind of casually. Oh, we'll get to that at some point. It's like by definition, it's in a year, and we probably won't because we only do one.
Right.
But, nevertheless, we will touch on it maybe, and we will continue to put these into the newsletter again. Sign up for that and keep sending us these because we love doing these also on this days. So that brings us to the end of the show. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Our transcripts, which you can find on our website, are done by Kala Nakua. This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Audrey Mardovich, executive producer. Yuri Lasordo, director of operations. Thanks to all of you who support this show by being members of Radiotopia. Find transcripts, sign up for our newsletter, find us on social, suggest topics, all that and more at our website, thisdaypod.com. See you soon. Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. If you feel like you're wasting time and money with your current business software or just want to know what you could be missing, then you'll need to join the millions of others who have switched to Odoo. Odoo is the affordable, all-in-one management software with a library of fully integrated business applications that help you get more done in less time for a fraction of the price. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday. Odoo, modern management made simple.
Radiotopia.